"They're letting you go, Carla, effective immediately." That sentence hit me harder than the day I lost my father. After 25 years of flawless work, no safety violations, record-breaking productivity, and the loyalty of every single person on that factory floor, I was handed a folder and a forced smile. The new guy, Nathan, barely old enough to rent a car, sat across from me in a tailored suit, nodding like he understood anything about machines. Or people. Corporate restructuring, they said. Fresh perspectives. But I wasn't just a name on the payroll. I built that safety system. I trained every shift lead. I kept that floor running like a heart that never missed a beat. And in return, they replaced me with a finance major who thinks intuition is just a spreadsheet formula. My name is Carla Mitchell, and this isn't just a story about losing a job. It's about what happens when the wrong people think experience is replaceable. Trust me, this story will make you angry. And by the end, just maybe, you'll cheer. Before we get into it, grab a cup of tea, turn up the volume, and don't forget to comment. Let us know where in the world you are and what time it is in your local area. We want to see how far these stories reach. I didn't pack up right away. After they walked me out of the office, I wandered back onto the floor one last time. No one stopped me. Most didn't even know what had happened yet. The hum of the machines. The rhythm of the place. It was all still there, like it hadn't just lost its compass. I moved slowly, brushing my hand along the edge of the control panels I'd helped install years ago, stopping by the inspection station where I once taught a young tech how to detect microfractures. Just by feel. I could still hear the subtle knock in the third compressor. It always made that sound when the temperature dropped below 60. I wasn't sentimental. At least I didn't used to be. But walking through that factory felt like stepping through the halls of my own memory. I had poured more than half my life into this place. Missed birthdays. Canceled holidays. Spent Thanksgiving dinners under flickering fluorescent lights while the line kept moving. When my husband left, it was this job that kept me standing. When Mason got sick in 4th grade, my supervisor let me run simulations from the hospital cafeteria. I fought for this place, negotiated parts budgets, rewrote safety manuals, crawled under jammed belt systems at 2 a.m. because I didn't trust anyone else to do it right. And now, some kid with soft hands and sharp shoes was sitting at my desk, thinking all he had to do was optimize workflows. He wouldn't know that Line B runs smoother if you reboot it after lunch. Or that Janine from Shift 3 needs 5 extra minutes because of her back surgery. You don't learn that in business school. I went home that night with grease still under my nails, and silence hanging in my kitchen. The machines weren't the only ones that hummed. I could feel something stirring beneath the surface, like pressure building where it didn't belong. I didn't know it yet. But that floor would call me back. Not officially, not at first. Because when systems fail, they don't scream. They whisper. And the people who've been listening for decades, we always hear it first. And I wasn't the only one who noticed the sound starting to change. 2 weeks after I left, I got a call from Jenna, one of the floor techs I'd trained years ago. Her voice was quiet, nervous. The second compressor had shut down mid-shift. She said no one could figure out why it had been serviced less than a month ago. I didn't say much, just listened. But inside, something started to twist. The next day, Diego texted me. The inventory for replacement gaskets was empty, and the new procurement rep advised them to wait until Q3 to restock. That wasn't just an oversight. That was a cost-cutting decision masquerading as efficiency. And those kinds of decisions, they compound fast. I started jotting things down in a notebook Mason gave me. He'd noticed I was restless more than usual, and handed me this leather-bound thing with a pen clipped to the side. "Just write it out, Mom," he said. "You'll know what to do later." At first, I thought he was just trying to keep me busy. But then I realized this wasn't about closure. It was about preparation. One night, I pulled out an old flash drive and began reviewing archived logs, maintenance records, safety audits, notes from past shift leads. There was a pattern to our system, one that didn't show up on spreadsheets, but lived in the rhythm of daily routines. And that pattern was breaking. Then it happened. A minor leak in the hydraulic line went unreported for over 36 hours. A cleaner slipped and sprained his wrist. Management blamed poor housekeeping, not the fact that the leak should have triggered a sensor one they hadn't recalibrated in months. I called Diego. "Keep an eye out," I said. "Write down anything that feels off. Trust your gut." He paused before replying. "They're not listening anymore, Carla. They think old systems are just obstacles." I knew that mindset. I'd heard it before. But never from people in charge. It wasn't just about missing steps. It was about dismantling a culture built on caution and care. The next morning, I opened my email and stared at a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Claire from Quality Control. Subject line: "We need to talk. Something's wrong." And I had the sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. Claire met me at a diner just off the interstate, the kind of place where the waitress knows your coffee order by the way you walk in. She looked tired. More than tired, haunted. "They're hiding things," she said, pushing a flash drive across the table. "Emails, budget memos, internal audits. It's all on here." I took it slowly, unsure what I was about to find. But the second I plugged it into my laptop that night, I understood. This wasn't just about corner cutting or a few bad calls. This was strategy. Deliberate. Calculated. There were memos between upper management and the finance team, outlining something they called a risk tolerance initiative. I had to read that phrase 3 times. They'd run simulations, actual models, calculating how much they could reduce maintenance and safety budgets before the projected accident rate would statistically rise above industry norms. They knew there'd be incidents. They just believed the cost of payouts or minor lawsuits would be cheaper than long-term safety investments. And the worst part? They started building this plan before I was even let go. One email from a regional VP I'd never even met said it plainly. "Insurance covers incidents. Missed earnings cost investors." Another note read, "The most significant barrier to implementation has been legacy leadership with a safety-first bias." That was me. I was the barrier, and they moved me out of the way. I sat back, laptop glowing in the dark. The factory hadn't just lost its compass, it had been turned deliberately toward a cliff. The next morning, I called Claire. "We need proof from inside," I said. "Ongoing changes. Day-to-day decisions, something that shows it's not just a theory, it's practice." She hesitated. "They're watching us, Carla. People have been warned not to cause friction." "Then we get smart," I said. "Quiet. Precise. No grand gestures, just truth." That day I started reaching out one name at a time. Diego. Jenna. Alyssa. Even Mason helped set up a shared drive encrypted and masked through a dummy project folder. We began building something real. In secret. But before we could take it further, I got a message from Jenna. "There's been an accident. Minor. But they're already blaming the operator. And Carla. It wasn't his fault." I knew then the numbers were starting to take on a human form. The incident Jenna mentioned turned out to be a conveyor jam that caused a heavy bin to fly off the track. It missed a technician by inches. The logs said operator error. But Jenna had photos. Worn rollers, ignored maintenance flags, and a request for inspection, denied 3 times. The same pattern was repeating itself like clockwork. And now we had names, timestamps, evidence. I started logging everything, every email forwarded, every whisper shared during breaks, every quiet conversation passed through burner accounts, or late-night calls. Mason helped me set up a second layer of encryption. If they ever trace this, he said, I want them to have to work for it. But secrets have weight. And people started feeling it. Diego nearly backed out after a shift lead cornered him in the locker room, asking why he kept taking notes. Alyssa said her manager pulled her aside, warned her not to get caught up in office politics. Claire, the most cautious of us all, had her access to the QA dashboard quietly revoked. Still, the files kept growing, then someone tipped them off. It started with an anonymous memo circulated through HR potential internal leak. Investigate unusual documentation behaviors. A few days later, I got a letter delivered by courier, not post. It accused me of interfering with company operations, violating non-disclosure agreements, and coordinating unauthorized surveillance of internal processes. Legalese wrapped in intimidation. I called my lawyer, Bill. He read it, laughed once, then said, "They're bluffing, but be careful. They want you scared." I wasn't scared. I was furious. The very systems I'd built were now being used as weapons against the people they were meant to protect. I didn't sleep much that week. My dining table became a war room. Screens, folders, post-its, maps of decisions, and consequences. I wasn't just gathering information anymore. I was preparing for something bigger. Then came a message from Diego. Short, unsteady. "They're shutting down routine maintenance on the main press line. Management says it's overkill. Carla, that machine runs hot even on good days." I stared at the words, feeling something cold settle in my chest. If that press failed, it wouldn't be a near miss. It would be real. And it would be loud. It was just past 6 in the morning when my phone buzzed. "Carla, it's Thomas." The plant manager's voice was tight. "The main hydraulic press is down. Production's halted. We need you." For a second, I thought he was joking. They'd pushed me out. Silenced every warning, dismissed every caution. Now, they wanted me back. "I'll listen," I said slowly, but under conditions. There was a pause. "Go on. I bring my team, Diego, Claire, Alyssa. I call the shots on the repairs. Full access to records from the last 6 months. And I work as a consultant. No contracts, no HR red tape." Another pause. Longer this time. "Fine. Just get us running again." I arrived at the plant an hour later, stepping into the chaos I'd seen coming. Techs standing idle. Supervisors scrambling. The press sat in silence, its control lights dark. A faint scent of overheated coolant in the air. Jason, the young manager who'd replaced me, looked pale. "We tried everything," he said. "It just won't respond." I didn't answer. I went straight to the maintenance logs. Half the entries were missing. The rest were filled with vague notes, delay check, monitor, next cycle, budget constraints. They'd skipped over weeks of critical care. It didn't take long to find the root cause, a heat exchanger failure paired with an unstable hydraulic regulator. It was avoidable if they'd followed the original schedule I'd written years ago. Before I grabbed my tools, I opened my email. I attached a full report of the situation to 3 addresses: the State Safety Board, our largest client's compliance officer, and just for good measure, my attorney. I wasn't just fixing a press, I was drawing a line. Thomas saw me a few minutes later, brow furrowed. "You already sent a report." "I did," I said. "Because this isn't about machines anymore, it's about trust." He didn't argue. As I pulled on my gloves, I could hear Diego and Alyssa unpacking the tools. My old team, back together. But this time, we weren't just there to fix what was broken. We were there to expose what had been buried. And something told me. The next few days were about to change everything. It took us 3 full days to revive the press. Not because the fix was complicated, it wasn't, not really. But because we had to undo 6 months of shortcuts, improper fittings, overdue fluid flushes, sensors that hadn't been calibrated since spring. Every corner they'd cut had added up. And now, they were paying the price. Word traveled fast. By the time we powered the system back on Meridian, the plant's biggest client had launched a surprise quality audit. Turns out someone had forwarded them photos of faulty valves shipped last month. Photos I'd taken. Jason must have passed them along. Quiet redemption, maybe. That same afternoon, the State Safety Board arrived. Clipboards, cameras, inspectors with questions that didn't leave room for spin. They were thorough this time. Every checklist, every protocol. Thomas, the plant manager, looked like he hadn't slept. Jason stood off to the side, silent. Hands stuffed in his pockets. He wasn't the villain in all this, not really. Just another young man thrown into deep waters and told to swim. By day's end, Leonard, the regional VP who'd orchestrated the cost-cutting, was reassigned. Moved to a different division, they said. But everyone knew what it really meant. Quietly pushed out the door. Jason was given a reduced role, and a new director came in from the parent company, one who walked the floor and asked people's names. I should have felt triumphant. But all I felt was tired. I sat alone in the break room that night, sipping coffee from a chipped mug I'd left behind months ago. The room looked the same, but the silence had changed. There was a different kind of hush now, not fear but a pause, like everyone else was waiting to see what would come next. That's when Thomas came in. "We've reviewed your documentation," he said. "It's comprehensive." I said nothing. "We want to offer you the director role, full authority over safety and operations." I shook my head. "That's the problem," I said. "Safety isn't something you manage by quarter." He looked down and nodded. "Then how about this?" he said. "Shh, consulting. 3 days a week. Your terms?" I paused, and then nodded. But I wasn't doing this for a title, or control. I was doing it for the people still working those lines, people who deserved better. And I knew the fight wasn't over yet. Because systems break quietly. But rebuilding, that takes noise. On my first day back as a consultant, I arrived before sunrise. The floor was still dark, the lights clicking on one row at a time as I walked in. There was a hush to the place I hadn't heard in years, like the machines themselves were waiting to see what I'd do next. I didn't head to any office. I walked the entire line, checking the bolts, the welds, the control panels. I nodded at the crew members I passed. Some old faces, some new. Some smiled. Some looked cautious. They'd seen people come and go. Promises, too. Diego met me at the control room, already halfway through calibrating the sensor systems. Alyssa was leading a crew remapping the coolant flow for the second line. And Jason. He was standing by the inspection bay, clipboard in hand. "Mind if I join the training?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "Only if you ask questions." He nodded. And that was it, the beginning of something better. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding more than machinery. We restored the preventive maintenance schedules I'd developed years ago. This time, with digital logs and real-time alerts. I taught shift leads how to recognize early failure signals, not just with data, but also with instinct. We held listening sessions where operators could speak openly, with no supervisors in the room. Slowly, the plant started breathing again. The most surprising part. It wasn't the new director's budget approvals or the supplier upgrades. It was the culture shift. People began trusting each other again. You could feel it in the way they passed tools, double-checked each other's work, stayed a few extra minutes to finish a checklist properly. One afternoon, while I was reviewing inspection data with a group of interns, a young woman named Amia raised her hand. "Ms. Mitchell." "Did you stop an explosion?" Once I blinked, caught off guard. "I did," I said. "But more importantly, I prevented 20 others before they even had the chance." She smiled. "I want to learn how to do that." That evening, I walked the floor one more time alone, machines humming in harmony, boots clicking on polished concrete. It didn't look perfect, but it felt honest. And sometimes, that's where absolute safety begins. When I first started writing again, it was just for me. Late nights, early mornings, scribbling down lessons I'd learned, not from textbooks, but from oil stains, cracked gears, and conversations over humming machines. But Mason kept pushing. "You should share this, Mom. People need to hear it." So I did. Slowly, carefully. I began turning years of lived experience into something others could carry. The book wasn't flashy, just a collection of reflections, technical notes, and personal stories. I called it Machines Speak If You Listen. And people did listen. A podcast invited me to talk about workplace integrity. Then came a trade journal article. A small university asked me to speak to their graduating engineering class. One of the students emailed me afterward. "Your voice reminded me why I chose this career in the first place." Back at the plant, changes took root deeper than I expected. A new policy gave veteran techs a formal seat in safety evaluations. Management began hosting quarterly town halls, where floor workers could propose procedural updates. Small things, but the kind that echoes, long after signatures fade. Jason, once eager to impress with numbers and dashboards, became one of the strongest advocates for the human element. He still checked his tablet, but he also walked the line, listened, even brought donuts on Fridays, progress in powdered sugar form. One afternoon, I watched Alyssa train a group of new hires, repeating something I used to say: "Your tools don't just fix problems, they prevent them." I didn't interrupt. I just stood there, hand resting on a railing I'd helped weld into place, years ago. That's what legacy is, not a name on a plaque, but people repeating your words long after you've stopped saying them. That evening, Claire stopped by with an old folder, one we'd used during those early days of collecting evidence. "I kept it," she said, "in case we ever needed to remember how far we've come." I flipped it open. My handwriting was faded, but firm. We had come far. But I still had one last thing to do. Because even after rebuilding, every system needs one final test. A final echo that tells you the foundation is firm. It was just after dusk when I returned to the floor one last time. Not for a meeting, not for a repair, just to walk. The plant was quieter than usual, the machines winding down as the last shift prepared to clean up. The soft whir of cooling fans, the faint click of metal contracting against air. It was music to someone who knew the rhythm by heart. I traced the path I used to take during inspections, past the press line now humming evenly after weeks of consistent care, past the quality bay where Amia stood with a clipboard in hand, double-checking reports with a seriousness that made me smile. I paused at the very spot where months ago that press had failed. Now it stood tall, smooth, steady. Not because of any miracle, but because people had remembered how to listen. Not just to machines, but to each other. I placed my hand gently on the side panel, warm but calm. Machines don't forget. They wait for someone who hears what they're saying. That's what this journey taught me. It's easy to measure performance in numbers, charts, and deadlines. But real strength, the kind that lasts, is built in quiet moments of care. Integrity. Connection. The things no spreadsheet will ever show. The truth is, I never set out to change the system. I just refused to let it silence what I knew was right. Respect isn't earned through titles. It's built through consistency. Through showing up day after day, doing the work, even when no one's watching. Especially then. As I turned to leave, I heard a voice behind me. "Thanks for coming back, Carla." It was Diego holding a coffee. Same brand we used to share, years ago. I took it, nodded, and we stood there for a while. No words needed. Because sometimes, the loudest victories come not with applause, but in the quiet hum of a floor that finally runs right. If you've ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or told you were replaceable, remember this: some knowledge can't be taught. Some voices can't be erased, and when the right people stay true, even broken systems can heal. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to hit subscribe. Share your story in the comments. And please tell us where in the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Let's see how far this echo travels.